The PS2's library is pretty hecking big. Daring statement, but true. Not so true that I'm about to throw around the term golden age with reckless abandon because A, that has its ties to colonialism and that's icky, and B, because I see boomer gamers chucking at the goddamn Atari 2600 era of games and just no. Really, whatever a given generation gets to consider what is the golden age tends to just depend on whatever they grew up with, pretty much. Though, that said, if we look at the raw data, then we can deduce that the PS2s had a very impressive amount of cult classics, hidden gems, platinum sellers, all-time greats, influentials, genre definers, groundbreakers, envelope pushers, subversirs, and of course, of all times. To the point where I do feel comfortable saying that its library is up there with the best of the best, along with the SNES and the N-Gage. N-Gage was the perfect combination of budget, technical growth, and design expertise, never being too expensive to produce for, but rarely going into full-on cheapo jank territories, even on the AA side of things. Which had its effects on localization too. Weird, obscure, niche appeal titles that otherwise wouldn't see release outside of Japan suddenly started popping up all over the place. Be it the whitewashed but hilarious H-Tech versions of Disaster Report and Raw Danger, 505 bringing over simple series titles for some reason, or shit like Blood Will Tell, aka Collecting Your Body Parts the Game, or Mr. Mosquito, aka Suck Booby. And so you would think that there wouldn't be much left in terms of games left behind. However, as I dared to say earlier, the PS2's library is pretty hecking big. So big, in fact, that there's a whole treasure trove of titles still waiting in Japan. Howdy guys, it's me, Jake Generican, the gosh dang American, and I want to talk to y'all about this little old game called Jojo. Now, I like me them there Jojos. However, I can understand a lick of what they're gosh darn saying. That's why you get the subs. With the subs, you can see little English letters that tell you what's going on. But the big problem I have is that this here Jojo PS2 video game ain't have none of them subs. It's all in Japanese. What? It's a goddamn car on my property.
Hey, it's me, the translator.
Well, I'll be damned, stranger. You best get the heck up out of here.
Wait, I got something that might interest you.
Well, then, let's hear it, boy.
Here it is, a translation of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Wind.
Well, darn tootin', hootin', rootin', dag nabbin', fuck dabbin', skirt babbin', herp durbin' dang.
Yeah.
That was a very factual, 100% true story, all facts, hyper-realistic retelling of how this fan translation came about. Also, these folks who actually factually did it for real IRL. But yeah, all other games in this video aside, this one's actually no longer locked behind a lingo locker. Developed in 2002 by a core team at Capcom using a specialized cell shading engine, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Wind, aims to recreate and retell part 5 of the series in beat-em-up form. And so that's pretty much exactly what it does. Bridging certain scenes with manga panels, but otherwise one-to-oneing this bitch in stunning 3D cutscenes. Bruh, hell yeah. Now, here's the part where I mentioned that I don't really watch anime, but I did get into JoJo a few years ago, but only got up to about halfway through part 4, but that I do know a lot about the later parts through games and discussions, and that I also don't really give a shit about spoilers, but if you do, then now you know that that is what this game is. We cool though, I'll refrain from talking about the plot much, other than saying that it's pretty dang enjoyable to see it all play out like this. I'm a big dick stickler for 3D scene recreation, like how they made little micro versions of all DBZ events for Budokai 1. Look adorbs as fuck. Or the intensely handcrafted action figure-esque cutscenes of the Devilman and Fist of the No-Ken PS1 games, bridging their way through their respective source materials with style. And that's basically what this do too. The tiny details and hand-drawn textures on these tiny mini-models, the carefully selected lighting and shadows and lockdown cameras, the harsh contrasts and colors, it's like an explorable collage of 3D JoJo art. Or rather, it would be if there was any exploration, as the stages are more like arenas for battle than anything else. Structurally, the game is as follows: cutscenes, boss fights, etc. No jobber enemies, no downtime, just a bridge of the show with the player fighting all of the major fights. And sadly, the combat is a bit on the stiff side. See, it doesn't really so much use combos as that you tend to trigger a lot of one-off attacks, be they stand or otherwise, that'll often knock an enemy down. I encountered one instance of juggling, but it felt more like I was abusing these stiff as shit controls and cutscene-like animations than doing anything that the game was really meant to do. Guess it's a bit like using abilities in an RPG, only instead of menu, you face button or shoulder. Not to say that it's bad, per se. Hits still connect good, and there's some consideration made in regards to being able to link moves together, like how Giorno can trap a dude in veins and then hit him with the rapid-fire auras, with which you can then basically stun-lock motherfuckers ad infinitum. Or how Bucciolati can trap a boy with his zippers and then hit him with the rapid-fire auras, with which you can basically stun-lock motherfuckers ad infinitum. Or how Narancia uses his little plane with its rapid-fire fire, with which you can basically stun-lock motherfuckers ad infinitum. And, much like the show, it relies more on interesting enemies with interesting abilities within engaging places and how to deal with them than on lavish movesets and the capabilities of your main cast. Like I said, the game is kinda like a boss rush with cutscenes. You fight all of the major fights from the show with hijinks intact, so you got a guy who's able to hide and teleport using shadows, turning the level against you, and you turning the level against him by smashing shit to make for more sun. Or a dude who can turn mini and can turn you mini. Or a guy who reverses your inputs and strips you of your stand powers, requiring one to fight him on two separate planes of reality, constantly switching control styles, and many, many more. All demanding head usage rather than fist fightage. And with that, the stun locking actually makes sense too. As some of these guys are so hard to hit in the first place, you kinda need to be able to at least hit them good whenever you can. Plus, you ain't just fighting as fist boys for the whole game, as the other gangdom is playable too and can vary very wildly, with certain stands being less like attacks and more like whole controllable characters on her own, or Mista, who due to shootgun fires with a range none of the others have. And thusly, while the feel remains rather stiff, it still balances out to a pretty unique and interesting game. The puzzly nature of the boss fights requires wits, the strange styles of offense and defense utilizing the stage are far more representative of how Jojo fights actually work than a balanced, legit, traditional or arena fighter could ever be. Which is why it sucks that even at the best of times, the game just doesn't handle very well at all. The stiffness never softens, the funitudes between characters varies greatly, the stun lock that you do can also be done to you, nor is the camera ever your friend as there's no way to control it, and moreover, all playable peeps got like 3 or so actual moves worth using, if any more at all, and damage outputs stay low, thus turning fights into trying to use more or less the same attack over and over, or simply ending it with a gimmick, if you're lucky enough to find one, though even that may very well simply open up a window to spam shit. The combat's cool when it works, cool on paper, but in practice, I don't know. It's difficult as a result of all of this, and because it's so spammy, stiff, or even kinda jank feeling, I never exactly felt rewarded or good about beating up these boys. Especially when some of the boss gimmicks, while creative, just ain't that fun. Controls being inverted, for instance, is pretty fucking aggravating, or this one fight here where you need to hold off a dude for 2 minutes, only that's quite long when all you have at your disposal to do so is an auto-locked-on shoot, or fuck you, try to aim with no reticle shoot. Still, I guess I'd hesitate to call it bad outright. Even at its worst, it's defo not the worst, and it's also just too different and interesting to be shit. Something about how each battle is its own whole little thing with its own whole little rules and its hidden environmental secrets and challenges is pretty engaging to suss out every time, certainly at first. That shoot stage may or may not have been great, but right afterwards you get a follow-up fight that's a whole box of tricks, containing curving and bouncy bullets, traps, timed reloads, and an enemy who moves fast and can only be hit from one side. It's not stun-locky or jerky, it's actually filled with movement. And cool, clever, quick thinking to the point where this one boss and its systems could for real be a game all its own, if expanded. Again, it's just unique, and I think that with time dedicated to it, one could legit get pretty good, which I'd imagine would be rewarding. No less because you can actually use your knowledge of the show, so there's defo something in there for sure. Besides, again, just fucking look at it. It's stylish as all hell and not exactly your typical factory-made anime licensed game. They tried something different, something true to its source, and even if that didn't result in the funnest game ever, they at least did just that.
この町を乗っ取るには町を支配する組織に入ってのし上がっていくしかない。僕はギャングスターになります。
Just not gonna lie, that was more or less a hallmark of the PS2's library, wasn't it? Much as I said in the beginning, experimentation and 3D design expertise done up over the past gen, new tech that allowed for bigger opportunities, and budgets that didn't have to be as sky high as they are now to make things look decently higher end, all perfectly shitstorming into place. I mean, this Jojo ain't the most highest budget thing, it didn't have the hugest theme, but in that it sure as shit doesn't look cheap, nor was it as tantamountly tied to sales, thus freeing the way for fuck-aroundability in regards to its design. And aside from all of the new IP that this would and could result in, what I find perhaps more interesting is the oodles of strange and bizarre spin-offs of otherwise big and established series that happened because it is too. Final Fantasy coming out swinging with the first legit sequel that was tonally and structurally unlike anything the series had ever had. Or even a fucking third-person shooter spin-off that mixes DMC-esque score tallies with style and a really jank shooting. Or Resident Evil saying fuck it and making an online game. Or Resident Evil saying fuck it and making a first-person Code Veronica that sucks shit. Or Resident Evil saying fuck it and making the masterpiece that is Dead Aim. Or Tekken releasing a Nina beat-em-up that was weirdly spooky and atmospheric for what it was, seemingly taking cues from survival horror games just as well.
Or Shadow the fucking Hedgehog! Woo!
Disgusting black creatures. Get out of my sight.
Yeah, what the fuck? Not to mention all of the kinda spin-off series that spawned from bigger franchises, like how DMC and Onimusha came from Resident Evil or Kingdom Hearts came from Final Fantasy, are all products of developers having the freedom to fuck around for funsies and try something new.
Our team consists of 2 sneakers and 1 sweeper.
Which leads me into Critical Velocity. Ridge Racer, you see, was also a series with a pretty set-in-stone formula, but the devs clearly wanted to use this opportunity to try some funky shit. Not that the main games never did that, like R4 suddenly having this stylish story mode and Ridge Racer 5 then not having a stylish story mode, but generally it would have to be about soapbox drifting and reusing the same courses between games a lot and electronic music with jazzy ambitions. But what if they wanted to make something more simmy and deep? Well, that's R Racing. The R in racing does stand for R after all. However, we got R Racing, so it's illegal to talk about in this video. But what if, part 2, they actually wanted to take those R4 story mode stylistic ideas into a far bigger direction? What if they wanted the music to not just have jazzy ambitions, but to be jazz straight up? Well... yeah, that's right, motherfuckers. It's Critical Velocity, the game that was too cool for localization, but cool enough to be set in America, starring American characters speaking Japanese in these neat-as-fuck little cutscenes. I'm pretty decently sure that the story is about these 2 dudes seeing these 2 girls driving by a blazon, and so they blaze with interest in pursuit, from which hijinks and situations will ensue involving local gangs, illegal street racers, and various levels of authority, and also just check out this main menu. I ain't even gotta say shit, cause it speaks for itself. Not to mention the equally stylish mission briefing screens that you need as well to tell you what do. But Yeah, this ain't really your average racing game where all you gotta do is come in firsts. You chase motherfuckers, get chased by motherfuckers, protect motherfuckers, crash motherfuckers, or even lose motherfuckers. And you ain't driving on racetracks neither, you're in the city, so courses need to be laid out as they ain't really courses, just city streets made your bitch. Filled with obstacles, unclear routes, and oncoming traffic. Unclear though the routes may be though, clear the game will remain. I might not be able to read this fucking briefing text, but I sure as shit can understand the map markers in terms like target, destroy, or chase, and the car customization menus are primarily in English, so you can, and will, car PG, which is what this be also. The driving is arcadey even by rich racer standards, but your world is open, grand, detailed, and deep. You get the big map with the mission markers, shops, side quests, and vibes for days. Also cops who can make you be arrested. They're cool with this though. In some ways, it's a bit like the PS2 Yakuzas, but cars. Or Driver or Need for Speed 2, but scathingly Japanese. Sure, you can tell me that these are Americans in America, but just look at this motherfucker. It's great. I love it. Can't say the same about how the game plays too. The handling is super smooth and frictionless with drifts flowing like wine, but grit still being maintained in the physics and the fast feels. There's tons of destructible environmental elements, scripted events during missions, blazing jazz music, absurd speeds and tight turns with fucking nitro boosts, and cinematic flair and style up the ass. It's not so much a racing game as it is a selection of playable chase sequences from your favorite action movies. Oh, you even fill in for a stuntman at one point, and in the next mission you're transporting a rare gem whilst being chased by thugs. For real though, this game has some varied-ass missions, mainly due to its open-world nature. Like, where and when on a map a mission will take place already changes the base layout of things. Not just aesthetically, but I mean, there's boxy, sharp turns in the warehouse district, wide but winding high roads along the city outskirts, crowded and narrow grit-like streets uptown, wide, sparse, suburban neighborhoods where the wrong turn will mean a big detour, or the ghetto which ain't fully mapped out, thus housing many secret little alleyways and backstreets. Add to that the general unpredictability of the oncoming traffic, the prior mentioned scripted obstacles like cheeky trucks, trains, bridge openings, and so on, and the general traction of your car crashing into some dude you're supposed to take out as you're mid-drift and boosting nitro to keep up with their higher level vehicle, with the streetlights crumbling and buildings whizzing by, makes for one seat-edging, action-packed, tense as dick, tough as nails, but fun as fuck experience where not one single mission ever feels the same. It's a simple game, sure, but one that's quite genius in its simplicity, making the most out of very little. I mean, hey, even the plot's neat and easy to follow, if no JP. It's action Hank trope central, and there's a lot of cool English words because America, so it's pretty well to tell who the bad boy cop is, and who the gang childs are, and so on. And as a frame to string this crazy shit along, it defo don't waste your time either, with frequent but never super long cutscenes and very over-the-top scenarios and acting that keep up a fitting pace. Honestly, I legit have nothing bad to say about this one. It's just really fucking good. Doesn't even look too low budget. The map looks nice with quite some great sights. The cutscene animation ain't perfect, but it certainly ain't shit by PS2 standards, and the gameplay is consistently fun as fuck. Shame this never released outside of Japan, I guess, as this is easily one of the coolest things Namco has ever done. And they put like a static JPEG of a dog in Ace Combat 7, so you know they're pretty cool. Okay, peep this intro. Listen to this music. Yeah, that's some Yankee vibes right there. A punk beat-up moment. In my last video about the Yakuzas, I had originally written a segment about the OSTs, but got bored with it and booted. Though mainly also I just lacked the terms to describe what I felt, I guess, because Yakuza 1 and 2's OSTs, just like this, feel like Japanese gangster music. The scratchy guitars, the wailing horns, the thumpy bass, the 70s film vibes. I don't know why it feels like that, but it does. Could bust out some music theory like, "Ah yes, because the half-seventh dingle-jingle chord stimulates the fucko-wucko in your brain, it makes it sound like crimes." But that doesn't really mean anything to anyone who matters, nor does it really tell us why it does, just that it does. Which is why music theory is mostly limited and dumb. In the comments on that video though, I saw some people listing movies that inspired the Yakuzas, and when I took a trip down their OSTs, I heard... Which, yeah, is definitely also that vibe. So, my take is that all of these shits are referencing an old thing that somehow subconsciously became ingrained into pop culture due to its frequent referencing, and that therefore this music now feels like that. I could ask why the originator chose to sound that way, but given the 70s sounds, I must say that it's probably just a product of its time that has now become timeless. I feel like that explains the why more than the that, but yeah. This game is Kenkabancho, the first one. I've covered 2 other games in this series before, both on the PSP and both far more anime wacky and butt rocky. As this one ain't like that. It's grainier, grittier, muteder, more seriouser, and also otherwise exactly the same. Honestly, I think that they've more or less been making the same game over and over again for years until suddenly they did Cute Boys and Dating, and now that's what the series is. It's quite a fucking path, I'd say. But as always, you start on train, arrive in town on like a school trip or some shit, and then the local bully boys are all like, "Hoorah! Who are these non-local bully boys?" And so then you go around town, dick around, get threaded, and beat up the local bully boys to become their bully boy king. Weapons are frowned upon because honor, but you can still use them. Shops are just menus, but still cute, and girls will swoon at the sight of your pompadour. It is essentially also a Yakuza game, but with no side quests or minigames, but with a fuck ton a whole lot more town. And instead of heat, its made beat-em-up-y gimmicky mini mechanic is trash talking. You're on the street, your eyes meet, with a bloodthirsty boy, upon which you yo mama joke at each other by constructing sentences, only I can't read! But hey, it's never exactly a life or death situation, you just get hit with the first blow. Combat's actually better than in some of the later ones though, funnily enough. The PSP games could definitely feel a bit stiff and slow, mainly because PSP, but here you got some decently swift square and triangle combos, charge moves, taunts, and squats, and generally it just feels pretty alright. Comically launching motherfuckers or bashing the shit out of them with them old-timey martial arts movie sound effects is quite good. Does it mean that the combat isn't a bit wooden though? You stay in place when basic moves and you walk sorta slowly, but considering the difference between Yakuza 1 and the later titles, I was expecting this to be a lot worse, and certainly not maybe better. As with the others anyway, you get new moves which you can assign to each phase of each combos, kinda like God Hand, and have RPG stats and buy clothes, which this is really the only big obvious edge I'd say the PSP entries have over this one. The clothing options are a bit lame. No cool Bosuzoku jackets or floral pattern pants or Aussie glasses and swanky sweatsuits, but I'll live. It's cool that it's there in the first place, and also it has a bit of a mechanical tie-in now, in that when you do use weapons and reveal yourself to be a bitch, the store owners will start refusing you, which I found that out the hard way. At least it's some kind of penalty for the everything that's supposedly bad, which ain't the case in the later games, but considering how much I like my Batwalks, I do prefer it that way. What also drags this one down a tad is the fact that the newer titles are a bit more structured and paced, with areas unlocking over time. Here, you can go on train and just fuck about wherever, which felt pretty aimless. Doesn't really give you a whole lot to go on by way of waypoints either.
And here you see the iron will and steel reserve of the small rural townsfolk.
Kenka B1 has voice acting and style. Feels less cheaper than its brethren somehow too, which you notice in easily this game's coolest asset, its towns. The PSP Kenka Banchos got cool towns, but they always felt kinda empty and low on detail as PSP environments are off to do. But this is good shit. It has a real atmosphere and mood to it. Rural, rowdy, yet quiet and quaint, feeling as if small-town life cozily continues around you as the local punks are tied up in a war world of their own. NPCs strutting, cars scuttle on by, kids walk about. You can hear trains off in the distance near station, birds chirping at playground, punks hang out at local supermarkets just chillin', and these chunky-looking models and textures with the badly aliased shimmering image animating your views nicely as the sun with accompanying lens flares lights up your face proper. It's not even like there's all that much to do in way of side quests or collectibles or people to talk to, but just something about it. It's just nice in that close bracket sort of way, you know? Fills my heart with posy vibes, it does, and the fire to beat up the punks who dare disrupt it. Granted, the base town is very small, but you go to tons of other areas too, like a bigger downtown place, a suburban hood with flats and shit, cool underground parking garages for parking, abandoned industrial sites, and even parks. It's quite high effort for what it is, which, granted, ain't much, because, well, there's a lot of asset reuse, and again, you can't really do much other than just fight boys until eternity, but it is pretty fun to explore for the most part. So yeah, I quite enjoyed this one. It is neat. Has some great presentation, and gameplay-wise, it's fun in its simplicity and vibiness. Sadly, it is a bit dense in regards to its Japanese text and menus, but if you've played Badass Bumble, you should be good, because it functionally works exactly the same in terms of how shit's laid out with the bedroom screen, and how the shops work and item shits, and stuff like that. Hey, psst, that new Umurangi Macro DLC just came out. I composed over an hour's worth of new music for it. Even did some level design stuff. And Tali added like cool new features, like roller skates and graffiti. Also 4 new levels that are very nice. Get it now. Buy it with money. Pay for the Tariq. Stay for the inevitable heat death that will consume us all. Umurangi Generation Macro. Available now on Steam. So, there's this visual novel adventure game for the Sony PS2 called Tantei Jinguji Saboru Innocent Black. It's not available on ROM sites aside from One That's Dead, and it's not on any of the Internet Archive redumps, and on eBay, only its guides are for sale. It is a game that's quite literally unplayable, which sucks, as I wanted to bring it up here as a game that I couldn't play. VNs don't really offer much when you can't read the language they're in, you see. Yeah, there's a few titles like that I do want to mention, because I know people are gonna be like, I can't believe you forgot to bring up insert game. Bitch, first of all, I do not forget. Okay? I simply just do not care enough, don't know about it, or have reasons not to cover it. And secondly, if you want to see a certain game covered, then you make the goddamn video. Get inspired, motherfucker. But yeah, the Flower, Sun, and Rain. Easily one of my favorite Suda games for real, but wholly unplayable in Japanese. Luckily, while it is a Japan-only PS2 game, it's also available in English on the DS. And even there, the game is obtuse and confusing enough as is, so you're pretty much fucked out of luck playing it in any language you can't read. There's also Front Mission 5, which never officially released outside of Japan, but has a playable fan translation. Games this big, though, really deserve their own video, but from what I've played now, it seems to be pretty fucking great. Not to shit on any of the other games in this video, but going from Jojo to Kenka Bancho to this is like, ooh. Square was on such a fucking level back on the PS2 in terms of graphics, weren't they? Not just because of high fidelity, big money, but also because every face, every room, every menu, and every animation looks stylized to a T. It's really something, and I'll definitely get back to this one on a later date. Oop, there it is. The Love the Lake chart. Just out of nowhere. I talked about this in my Moon video because they made Moon and then became all of these other studios, including Vanpool, whose first game, Indonesia, is as close to a sequel to Moon as I think any of the other offspring be. And you just goddamn look at it for one, and also look at this. It's quite a wordy game with a crazy setting that, without knowing the words, is really hard to parse properly. So I don't want to fully cover it here. But if Moon was able to get an English Switch release decades after the fact, then maybe this could too, as it's really fucking cool and different. It's wild art style, jazzy yet fittingly tribal OST, and ever so sweet heart and soul that bleeds even through the thickest language barriers with its quaint as fuck voice mumble and quirky character designs, demand and deserve attention. Especially because unlike its cult classic brethren, Indonesia only managed to sell 9,757 copies during its first week of sale in Japan. Thanks Wikipedia for that sentence. Much as Moon though, you play as a kid child teleported to a crazy world. This time not a video game, but instead a funky little island with funky inhabitants, whom you bring together using your emo powers to free the island out of its 10-day time loop stasis. Which, as per the Love the Lake standard, requires a lot of close attention paid to the details and personalities and schedules which its world and folks bring. And that's hard to do when you can't read shit. So, hashtag free Indonesia. Kinda cringe, I know. Actually don't do that. But like, keep this game in your heart, your soul, your bank of knowledge. Talk about it. Share images on message board or on your Discord servers of choice. Or again, make your own fucking video if you want to see one so badly. Spread the word by spreading that love. Save this little buddy. Anyway, there's many other text-heavy, big boy, story-driven games like a whole Tales game that I'd love to cover but can't really. Plan to later or simply don't know enough about. So, to get a real vibe going in the end, that's strong enough to make the lingo locks its bitch, we of course end with the boy, Boku. There he is, the boy, Boku. If you don't know, Boku no Natsuyasumi is a series about spending the summer vacay vibin'. Fishing, bug catching, exploring, rock skipping, bonding, cycling, swimming, minigaming, and so on. They're very free-form games where each day you just kinda do whatever. There are objectives like clearing away a beehive to open up a new path for you to chill in, but the games will never really force you to do much of anything, even when they secretly do sometimes, with specific events being set only on specific days, optional or otherwise, but the progression of it still feels completely and wholly natural. You stumble into and onto things. You don't go where you're told or do what you're expected, you just go and do. I talked about the first game before and its spin-off and part 4 for the PSP in these videos respectively, and now I'm gonna talk about part 2 in this video respectively. As always, Boku's staying with some relatives, this time in a quaint quiet fisher's folk town with all the deep sea diving and tiny plank bridging that means you. The former actually being something that this one introduces, along with bicycles and those two things are already pretty cool. I could complain about how the bike only has a very limited drive area due to stairs and steps, which I know they do better in part 4, but yeah, fuck it. It's neat, and the swimming is great. Sunken ships, secret waterfall caves, mysterious crevices, cool little lagoons, and many more things for you to find as you explore. You're staying at a house that's a little shop and hostel connected through walkways, which is a weird house design, not typical at all, but in that it's much more fun to uncover. Piques your curiosity and sense of wonder about something as otherwise mundane as a house, much as you would have felt as a child going about exploring at home, literally right away once the game starts. And there's many other little touches like that, like the vines on the side of the house reaching far up. All you can do is peek up at them, but with the detailed, methodical way which it's presented, it's hard not to instantly go, I wonder where these lead to. could I climb? And right next door, there's a spooky abandoned derelict house. What secrets could it hide? Cat secrets. Plus, the camera angles make every corner its own little mystery. Each screen its own little frame with its own little story to tell. Not to mention that due to it being summertime, doors will be open. You can just hop, skip a rock, waltz up the stairs, and suddenly you're inside the doctor's office, perusing around on adventure. This one has a lot more interiors than the PS1 and PSP games do. This is a scarcely populated but pretty rich fucking area, in which everyone seems to have weirdly built mansions with winding corridors, secret back houses, and all kinds of ways of entry and levels of elevation. I can't stress how neat it is to simply be in this place. To climb a random ladder, to enter someone's backyard and fool about their house wondering who lives here, and where the single locked door may go, only to then end up navigating a maze of bridges and stairs and back roads and suddenly finding yourself running down a winding forest path filled with all manner of mystery. And as you do, paths will also unlock. Stories will unfold, items will be found, and people will be met. One moment you're fighting beetles with the homies in the treehouse, and the next you're being led into the dog zone. I don't want to give too much away, but this game, this series, is kind of like Animal Crossing, but with actual story progression and events. Not to say that Animal Crossing needs that, but by golly, does it ever work here. Also, fuck, this game is gorgeous. God damn. The blend of CG and detailed hand-drawn art with the simple but adorable models is such a fucking vibe. I'd legit frame frames of this game if I could, which they knew as well, as there's many interactables that don't really do shit. The swings, the benches, the whatever this spinny thing is called, or the little water fountains, it's all stuff just there just to be. Just to let you soak in the niceness of it all. And as I did, I couldn't help but reminisce about Millennium Kitsch and what they possibly could be doing now. If Dubspedia is to be believed, the studio only has 8 people that somehow managed a fucking PS3 game without death. One I will cover in due time, of course, so that couldn't have necked them. Attack of the Friday Monsters, their latest release, is probably the most known thing they ever did, but for some reason, they haven't done shit since. A Winter Boku game was announced, but according to a Gematsu article, according to the director, that has a 5% chance of actually coming out. And their last real update on their website was from 2016. I even had professional J-Games journalist Oni Doni look into it for me after he's bullied me many times for saying Boku no Natsuyami, and he was able to suss out that they make curry now, and otherwise don't really suss out and direct complaints to Sony, who may or may not own the IP. And given that Sony's basically done everything in their power over the last 5 years or so to stamp out any and all first-party Japanese development, I doubt we'll ever see this series again. Luckily though, I wasn't the only one pondering upon those swings, as a Japanese indie dev by the name of Inasa Fujio made this adorable little tribute called Rainy Season. It's a rainy, sadder, more story-driven Boku that's not any less sweet or chill. Essentially using the Boku framework for something different, same way Attack of the Friday Monsters did. And hey, Millennium Kitchen at least aren't dead. They could come back, independently or otherwise, with something else. And with that, I have ended this video. I guess the real golden age was simply the swings that we sat on along the way.